Today is the 2nd of March, 2016, and the headline of this show is Trump and Hillary win big, and Sanders is still surviving. Trump and Hillary won 7 states each in Super Tuesday. Sanders won 4. And we're discussing this problem with a guest journalist for the Athens News, David DeWitt. And I am Robert Whaley, retired historian from Ohio University. And this is the Athens Speakout, number 356. So the big question is now, can Cruz or Rubio or Kasich stop Trump's railroad train going to the nomination convention in Cleveland this July? It seems that Texas Senator Cruz has the best shot in terms of votes. Rubio is banking on the Florida vote, and Kasich is banking on the Ohio vote. And if Ohio doesn't take, if Kasich doesn't take Ohio, he's going to be out. So even the more important issue than the 12 or 11 states that ran on Tuesday is the vote in South Carolina last Saturday on the 27th of February 2016. Now, the voters and the pundits and the Republican Party want to forget history, and they never want to mention the presidency of George W. Bush, who was president between 2000 and 2008. Now, the importance of the South Carolinian Republican Party is that they have some grasp of history. They have a better grasp of history than practically any other state party. And they were instrumental in getting Jeb Bush out of the race in South Carolina.
Yes, they were.
They know how to do it. And the senator there is Lindsey Graham, a militarist.
Yes, he's very hawkish.
Career Army man. The second senator used to be DeWitt, a white.
Jim DeWitt.
Yeah, but 2 years ago, he resigns his position as senator and goes to the Heritage Foundation and becomes a fundraiser. Now, what's behind that? Because both of those senators knew something about history, and South Carolina was the decisive state in 1860 that started the Civil War. So South Carolina intellectually leads the other southern states.
Yes, and many of the Confederate leaders came from South Carolina.
Absolutely. They got the secessionist movement going. And then what happened in 1948? Strom Thurmond.
Strom Thurmond.
A brand new Dixiecrat.
Right.
So the South Carolinians know where the votes are in the South. Now, they don't know anything about the North. That's their great weakness. But anyway, they can certainly manipulate the southern states and lead the other southern states. And they then have reformed the present Democratic Party in South Carolina. And it's not quite as solid as it used to be. South Carolina is one of the original 13 colonies. Charleston, South Carolina was the fourth most important port at the time of the American Revolution, following Philadelphia, New York, and Boston. George Washington won the revolution against the British Empire by seizing the backcountry. And it was sort of like Vietnam War and Iraq War in reverse. Because the Vietnamese and the Iraqis and the Afghans know where the geography is of their own country. And George Washington was losing most of the battles in the American Revolution. But he wore out the British generals who were aliens in the 13 colonies.
Yeah, luckily their generals weren't much better.
Well, their generals were foreigners.
Yeah.
So,
and we had the aid of France.
Yeah, well, now there's another secret that's not well known in the United States.
Well, it should be.
It should be. Benjamin Franklin was a great diplomat.
France was key to winning that war.
Absolutely. And what happened was that George Washington ran Cornwallis down into the peninsula in Tidewater, Virginia, Battle of Yorktown. And he said, all right, there's the French fleet. Do you want to surrender to me? Or do you want to get on that French ship and go back to France? No, we'll surrender.
I can actually tie the French involvement in the Revolutionary War to Ohio history on a personal note.
Good, great.
Marquis de Lafayette.
Oh, you have related?
Well, I'm not related, but Peter DeWitt, an ancestor of mine,
the name, yes,
was a member of the Virginia 1st Militia.
Good deal.
And he was, and as such, he got a land grant through the war in Kentucky. Moved to Clark County, Kentucky, and then moved up to Ohio, and was one of the founders of Fayette County, which was named after.
That's right.
Marquis de Lafayette.
That's right. Fort Benning.
And so is Lafayette Square across from the White House,
North Carolina. Fayetteville, North Carolina.
Sure, yeah, there's a lot of places named after it.
So the southern states, in general, know more history than the American states. And South Carolina knows much more than Alabama and Mississippi. They're Johnny-come-latelys. So anyway, the 27th of February, 2016, Hillary won big, a landslide. 70.3% of the vote in the Democratic primary, and Bernie Sanders only had 25.7% of the vote. Bernie Sanders was unknown from Vermont. Hillary Clinton was campaigning in South Carolina since 1993.
Yeah, they know the Clintons very well.
That's right. So anyway, her victory speech was rather routine, but she touches all the bases, and she thanks Mickey Haley, brand new Democrat. Mickey Haley is the governor of South Carolina. Her grandparents came from India, and she became a convert to the Baptist religion. And she is the new non-racist governor of South Carolina. Now that's thinking ahead. The second Democratic senator who replaced DeWitt is a black. Tim Scott, unknown, handpicked by the white establishment. Well, now, Tim Scott may well be a Clarence Thomas on the Supreme Court. I don't want to call him Uncle Tom, but he has that potential. And whether he'll last another 5 years in that chair is going to be a touch-and-go game. But anyway, for this election, South Carolina is making a pitch to the national parties that South Carolina is not as deep racist as it used to be. So anyway, in 1993, Bill Clinton got a black representative, Jim Clyburn, from South Carolina. And South Carolina has 6 white Republicans in the House of Representatives, and Clyburn got the black vote in all of the South lined up for Hillary, because Bernie Sanders is an unknown.
Yes,
and Bernie Sanders got on the campaign trail too late. That's the importance of South Carolina.
Clyburn's still very influential.
Yeah, absolutely, because he's got the incumbency. And he's got a safe seat in Columbia, and he's got another safe seat along in Piedmont, the Central Highway, US 1, Interstate 95, from New York to Florida, good on the tourist business. And the South Carolinian Tourist Bureau is making a big pitch. South Carolina is following North Carolina and Virginia, and we're going to be playing a future role in race relations. And the governor, Mickey Haley, took the Confederate flag down this year after that assassination by some big white bigot who went into the Methodist Church in South Carolina and killed 9 blacks, cold blood.
Including a state senator.
And anyway, the Charleston population, white and black, got around to the Christian religion and solidarity, forgive people for their sins, and South Carolina is not as racist as it used to be. Watch out for the new South Carolina. That's what I don't think the pundits in Washington, D.C. and New York quite appreciate. They're campaigning on the stereotypes of 1948, and they think that the South Carolina is still the old solid South. It's not quite Alabama, is what I'm saying. Now, here is an interesting column written in the New York Times by a brand new pundit or editorialist. His name is Charles Blow.
Yes.
Well, he's black.
Yes.
But I don't think anybody else knows that. And he gives us
in the journalism world, he's pretty big, but he's just starting to reach mainstream audiences. But he's been a respected columnist. I believe he was in Florida before.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I knew nothing about him.
And he's pretty well respected.
Yes. Well, he's a competent journalist, and he gives a sociological picture of South Carolina. 43% of the population are white, 55% are black.
This is the Democratic primary.
This is the title. This article is called "The Fire Meets the Wall." Sanders faces a more difficult test. Written on in February 15th, 2016, and he says, "What is the picture in South Carolina? Race. 43% of the population are white. Majority, 55% are black. The whites all go to the Republican Party. The blacks still go to the Democratic Party, through Clyburn and others. Okay, sex. 39% are male and 61% are female. Old ladies, retired, on Social Security. They're not going to move. Age. Under got to put my glasses on.
30.
Under 30, 14%. And 86% are over, let me see, 36 are over 30 years old.
Yeah.
This is why Sanders didn't make much of an impact.
Well, he appeals mostly to young people.
That's right. That's right.
And he's been trying to make inroads among black people, but I think that there's a familiarity with Clinton,
intellectual cultural gap.
Bill and Hillary Clinton that
yeah, right.
I think there's more trust and more familiarity.
You go with who you know.
Right.
And Sanders got in the race too late. Anyway, Hillary on the national issue gave a routine speech, her victory speech. She touched all the issues. She was kind of a light Sanders. We want more education. We want to and discrimination, particularly among women, and that's her number one issue. And she quoted St. Paul, the book of Corinthians. Love is patient, love is forgiving, and we Christians love all people, and love your neighbor as yourself, and this is the moral code of bringing America together. Now, that message is failing among the new generation since 1948. Parents are failing their kids' education from 5 to 18. We have big divorce rates, big alcoholism. Drugs, as you know, are a problem in Ohio ever since the 1960s. And the Roman Catholic Church has some problems with sex and bringing women into the clergy. And they have some problems on the Roe versus Wade, freedom of choice for women who, for some reason, need abortion as the last resort of birth control. So anyway, Hillary gave a competent speech, and it sounded like Bernie, but just a slightly weaker. She wants to raise the minimum wage, but $10 is enough, not $15. That's the kind of a campaign she makes, campaign speech. And it may be that if Hillary wins the nomination, Bernie's hope is that maybe he'll get the vice president's job as a last resort if, and there's still an if out there, Bernie loses the nomination in Philadelphia. And that's becoming more and more the trend of the future. Anyway, the slogans of Hillary were useful, and Hillary campaigned in South Carolina since 1983 and gave a nice victory speech. Sanders knew he lost and didn't even bother to stay in South Carolina and went to Minnesota for the next campaign, which was wise on Sanders' part. Okay, I want to change the subject to another question. Your paper in Athens did a straw ballot in those last days of February, in which Eddie Smith got the straw vote against Hillary, against Grace, against Sarah Grace for Debbie Phillips' seat. And Bernie took the vote for the straw vote, 45 in Athens County to 32. Now, Hillary won the straw vote. I think the vote was 45 to 32 for Hillary, but against Bernie. Hillary got 45%, and Bernie got 32%. And I didn't record the vote of Smith and Grace. Anyway, why do you think that's the case? Why did Hillary win?
Well, if you notice...
You were there as the journalist.
I was there, yes. You were there as well.
Yes, I was.
This was the Athens County Democratic Party straw poll breakfast, and there were about 103, 104 people who attended from the last count that I saw. And not everyone voted. If you counted the votes, I think the highest vote tally was 78. So not everyone cast a ballot, but...
But they hid the speakers.
Yeah. And so Eddie Smith won in the Democratic primary for the 94th House District in the State House. Ted Strickland won over P.G. Sittenfeld.
He really didn't have much opposition. He won 90% of the vote.
Yeah, and Hillary won over Bernie. But I think part of the reason why... There's a tremendous amount of support for Ted Strickland. Locally.
No doubt about that.
There always has been. He used to represent this area in U.S. Congress, and he used to be the governor of Ohio.
Yeah.
And Ted Strickland's always been a big Hillary Clinton supporter and ally.
Yes, that's right.
I think that's part of it. I think a lot of that vote goes over from Strickland. It trickles, up in this case to Hillary.
Absolutely.
So that's how I would explain it. I think that there's a lot of residual respect for Ted Strickland and his alliance with Hillary Clinton.
Yeah. All other things being equal, you go with the incumbent in both parties.
Sure, yeah.
And Trump is an oddball.
That's putting it mildly.
Well, my argument for why I was going with the minority voice.
Yes, you spoke for Bernie.
That's right.
At that straw poll breakfast.
And I pointed out that the voters, even in Athens County, tend to forget history. The United States fought a war in Korea from 1950 to 52. There was no victory. There was no strategy. And Lyndon Johnson, a Democrat, and Richard Nixon, a Republican, fought a long, unwinnable, imperialistic war in Indochina. And at first they went in there to support the remains of the French Empire. And in 1954, the French mercenaries left the remains of that army to Eisenhower. And in 1961 to 1975, the CIA, the Department of Defense, tried to establish a satellite regime in Saigon that would carry out an anti-communist crusade. And the United States did not win that war, and it killed about 500,000 Vietnamese, Laotians, and Cambodians. And the United States lost 58,000 men, and there is a big memorial down in Washington, D.C. for the great lost cause. And Hillary Clinton is a little bit weak on that issue, and she wants to be the commander-in-chief. Bernie doesn't say that he wants to be the commander-in-chief. He wants to roll back the tax breaks of Wall Street millionaires. So that's the difference between the two candidates. And the Republican Party under George W. Bush, learning nothing from the Indochina, fight losing wars in the Middle East against 22 Muslim nations. Only 4 of them are viable. And I don't think that Bernie would want to go to a long war in the Middle East. He is an American Jew. He's not a Zionist. And he knows that in World War II, the Jewish community, with only 2% of the population, lost a lot of people through war. So Bernie Sanders is for peace, and I am for peace. I supported McGovern. I supported Eugene McCarthy, and you have to have a viable strategy for the long run, and that's why I'm going to go down probably as with the lost cause for Bernie Sanders. But I speak the truth to power. That's my philosophy of politics.
I would like to mention, just because you mentioned it briefly, the Vietnam Memorial in D.C. was designed by Athens native Maya Lin.
Good.
But beyond that, speaking to your point, Hillary Clinton has a fairly standard hawkish neoliberal foreign policy agenda.
Right.
Whereas Bernie has consistently supported a lot of defense bills and whatnot, but I agree with you. He is more prone to peace. He's not. I don't think that he's going to paraphrase John Quincy Adams, go about the world seeking monsters to destroy.
Great. Okay. Do you want to say anything more about Sanders' campaign, or should we go on to to a new subject?
I think, well, it's so Hillary Clinton won in South Carolina, and she had what?
And she did 11, won in other southern states.
And I'm gonna, I'm gonna get to that.
Good.
And she won big in South Carolina, and that gave her what the media insiders like to call the big momentum.
Big momentum, okay.
She had the big mo after South Carolina. She went into Super Tuesday with that, and then she won, what, 7 out of 11 states yesterday?
That's right.
So that continues her big momentum, and what I foresee, and I could be wrong, anything could happen, she could be indicted by the FBI for all we know, but what I foresee going on from here is that she's going to continue to ride that momentum as long as she can. And Sanders is going to continue to say, well, we're getting delegates awarded proportionally, and we can stay in this, and we can still win. And he's going to hang on for the ensuing months.
The pollsters say that Hillary's going to take the nomination.
But, yeah, I think I would agree with that in the end. Even though I'm a Sanders supporter, I would put Hillary Clinton as the odds-on favorite to win the Democratic nomination at this point.
Right. Now,
I'm going to vote for Sanders on March 15th.
So am I. So am I.
I don't expect him to win
And
the
my wife,
nomination.
Lois, who is a feminist, is going to vote for Hillary.
That's fair. See, I don't. The flip side of this.
I believe in free speech. I believe in free.
The flip side of this is that I do not like seeing this primary getting as bitter as it has. You see things on the internet right now.
Did you hear that, Lois?
Bernie or bust.
Just reminding you it's halftime.
Halftime. Well, that's a good reminder. Well, anyway, this is Dave DeWitt, journalist from Ohio University, and we are trying to evaluate the importance of Super Tuesday and the 2 races, Trump against 2 or 3 Republicans who think they can still pull the nomination out, although that looks increasingly slim.
Yeah, speaking of how, as much as Hillary seems like the nominee at this point, I think on the other side, it's pretty much a given that Donald Trump's going to be the nominee for the Republicans.
Okay, I don't believe in the given, but let's say they're ahead in the polls.
He's ahead in the polls. I definitely don't see how Rubio could make a comeback at this point.
Well, there's Rubio, there's
He
Cruz,
has to win
and
Florida.
there's Kasich. Yeah.
Kasich's not going to
You don't think he's going to
anything.
take Ohio?
I think that's what he wants to do. I think that's why he's staying in until March 15th. I think he might win Ohio, but I don't think even if he wins Ohio, it would give him any excuse to stay in the race. He's not going to win the nomination. His best hope...
Well, if he takes some delegates, he may make a block convention.
Well, yeah, he wants a brokered convention.
Yeah.
And he wants it to get so bitter and so angry that everyone just throws their hands up in disgust and says, okay, well, we'll have to, yeah.
Cruz has got Texas in the bag.
But you have a Republican who's won in New Hampshire. He's won in South Carolina. He won 7 of 11 states on Super Tuesday. I cannot think of any other election in history where that was the case, where that person did not go on to be the nominee.
Well, he's got some trouble with the media.
Oh, of course, yeah, absolutely. Well, he makes speeches where he points to the media and talks about what horrible people they are and gets the crowd to cheer about it.
Yeah, race is still going to be an issue. And something might tip, but it's a long shot. So anyway, to talk about Sanders, he did pick up a endorsement, an unknown woman, a black, by the name of Tulsi Gabbard from the Democratic National Committee.
The vice chair.
Yeah,
who had to resign.
She resigned from Debbie Schultz and the Hillary chair. And then Sanders also picked up a representative from Orlando, Florida, Alan Grayson. You know anything about him?
I do. He's a solid progressive from Florida. And He's also big on things like income inequality and wealth inequality, opposing the corporatism and the greed on Wall Street. And so it doesn't surprise me at all that he's for Bernie because they share the same priorities.
And the most important endorsement is Robert Reich.
Robert Reich, Bill Clinton's labor secretary.
Yeah, but Berkeley, California, he's been going into economic theory.
He has. He made a great documentary on Netflix. It's called Inequality for All, and he explains wealth inequality, wage stagnation, income inequality since the Reagan era in America in a really
But he really knows Keynes. He understands
way.
Keynesian economics.
Absolutely, yeah, he's a Keynesian.
And the problem with most of these pundits, I don't think they've ever had an economics course.
Well, yeah.
They not only never heard of Karl Marx, they never heard of John Maynard Keynes.
Yeah.
They never heard of Franklin Roosevelt.
I don't think that they've spent a lot of time reading the history on that.
But they want Ronald Reagan. That's the only president they know, Ronald Reagan.
Well, they're still somewhat snowed by the whole Milton Friedman supply side.
One bad news, though, one bad news for the Democratic Party and the future of the Democratic Party is that Bernie Sanders didn't get any senators endorsing him, and there are 47 Democratic senators who back Hillary. They don't want to take a risk. They want to play defensive ball and don't want to talk about the moral economic issues.
There is one senator who has not endorsed yet, though, and I got to talk about her because she's my girl. I love her, Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts.
She wants to be the economic. She wants to be. She doesn't want to be president.
No. If she would have ran for president, she probably could have won the nomination.
She was not going to go against Hillary.
I consider her a bellwether for progressives.
She's going to get an appointment whether Hillary or Sanders wins.
What I like about her strategy by not endorsing, though, is that she can use the power and influence that she has to shore up, the Democratic and unite the Democratic Party once the nominee is decided.
She'll make a very good secretary.
She'll bring people back into the fold as bitter as this primary is getting.
Or SEC chairman, which she had at one time.
Could be, yeah.
And she can crack down on Wall Street.
Yeah, that's what she does. That's why I like her so much.
Yeah, I'm for Warren, Elizabeth Warren. Well, Massachusetts has a strong Democratic Party. And the vote there was very interesting. It was 50-49. The scared Democrats voted for Hillary. The conservative Democrats voted for Hillary. But they get the same number of delegates.
Yeah, it's awarded proportionally.
Yeah. So that's why the Democratic Party is more democratic. The Republican Party have this winner-take-all thing.
Right.
And that's somewhat of a fixed ball game. And the Republicans still have those super delegates and Wall Street firms that can buy they can buy every election in the United States if they want to, but they didn't dare do that yet.
That's a fail-safe.
Yeah, that's the future. Okay, you have any other remaining issues here? Because I would like to open up a new...
Yeah, we can move on.
I would like to mention the importance of morality and Cornel West. Do you know anything about Cornel West?
Yes, I love Cornel West.
Okay, who is he?
Cornel West is a professor at Princeton.
Princeton, right.
At Princeton. He's a very powerful voice for equality and race relations in America. He's written many books, makes a lot of television appearances, very eloquent, well thought out, well-spoken individual. And he's had a long history fighting for civil rights and equality. Very well respected.
He replaces Martin Luther King as the voice of morality. And he backed Bernie Sanders, a little late, 28th of January, 2016. And he's a critic of Hillary Clinton and says she's only giving lip service to social justice. Now, that's going to play an important role in the coming years. And that's an endorsement for Bernie. And even if Bernie is too old to run again, he's opened up the door to further discussion of socialism in the future. The youth are going to go with that. And the youth are going with Cornel West.
Yeah. Well, I think when he makes those criticisms about Hillary, he's tapping into a frustration that a lot of people have on the left.
Right.
And it's a way that sometimes the Clintons make me feel is that they'll talk about the issues that Bernie and Cornel West and Elizabeth Warren talk about, but it almost feels like they're patting us on the head and patronizing us about it.
Right.
That you can almost tell that they say, yeah, inequality is bad and everything, but then she goes and makes the speeches to Goldman Sachs, and it just doesn't feel like she's going to really hold their feet to the fire in any sort of effective manner. Now, part of the reason why I wanted Bernie to be in this race, and part of the reason why I've been supporting him from the beginning and made donations to him, is because I wanted the conversation to go this way. I wanted him to pull her in this direction, even if I didn't think that he could necessarily win. And so far he has, and she is at least rhetorically going in that direction. Now, what that means if she becomes president, if she's actually going to follow through on these things, I think it's going to be up to us on the left to hold her accountable and demand that she does.
Do you want to say anything about the moral leadership of Martin Luther King?
I miss him.
You miss him?
Yeah,
well,
absolutely.
You were too young. You don't even remember.
I know, and I miss him.
He's only
I wish
history
that
to
he
you.
were. Yeah.
I actually saw Martin Luther King on the stage.
Did you?
Yeah.
When? Where?
1963. He was the Man of the Year. In 1963, I was 33 years old, teaching at the University of Maine. And we went down to a little Catholic seminary in Biddeford, Maine. And the Catholic Church was repudiating Pope Pius the 12th.
Oh, yeah. Was that the Second Vatican Council?
We are bringing out John the 23rd, and they were moving to the left on civil rights, and they had a nice seminar. John Lewis was there, and the guy who was a homosexual was there. Black homosexual.
Oh, Baldwin?
No, not Baldwin.
James Baldwin?
No, another guy who was part of the civil rights movement. His name slips my mind right now. But he and Martin Luther King got into a little fight on the homosexual question. Anyway, at 2 o'clock in the morning, I'll think of his name. Well-known guy.
I have 3 pictures of American figures from history hung up in my apartment. One is Abraham Lincoln, the second is Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and the third is Martin Luther King. Right.
Well, that's very good. Anyway, Martin Luther King knew the importance of Hitler's war because Hitler exposed racism for all time. And in 1941 to 45, Hitler's war against the Jews has exposed white racism in all of Europe, including Germany. And when the United States put the Nazis on trial for anti-Semitism, the Germans had an interesting reply. You don't like what we did to Jews. What are you guys doing with the blacks in the South? And that got to the white conscience, which has been one of the keystones to the whole civil rights movement, and is finally getting on to South Carolina. Black racism, white racism is a sinking ship. The United States has to be tolerant toward different races. And Martin Luther King does not support Zionism. Bernie Sanders does not support Zionism. And Hannah Arendt doesn't support Zionism.
Well,
so the future of Zionism is in question.
Don't you think that part of it is a lack of appreciation for the actual history of
Everybody
America?
selects his own history. That's the problem.
Because
they don't want to see the comprehensive.
A lot of people seem to think that the race question was somehow settled by the Civil War, and they don't acknowledge that for 100 years after that,
that's right,
there was institutional housing discrimination,
that's social
employment discrimination, education discrimination,
social Darwinism,
that has repercussions to this very day. Dr. King talked about a promissory note in the Bank of Justice.
You
this
got
is
it.
part of his I Have a Dream speech, and it's one of the lesser quoted parts. But he talks about a promissory note in the Bank of Justice that was guaranteed to all Americans in the preamble of the Constitution. And he was saying back then in 1965 that this promissory note had not been paid on for a lot of people in America. And I would argue that as great of strides as we've made even since he made that speech 40 years ago, 50 years ago? 50 years ago, that account has not been paid in full. And if you know the history of it, then that's clear.
Right.
But I think a lot of white people have not ever really acknowledged the true history of this country and race relations. And until we do that, James Baldwin used to talk very eloquently about this, brilliant novelist.
Right.
Until white people really acknowledge that history and the repercussions of it down through today, it's going to be a tough problem to solve. We need to pay that promissory note in full.
Right. Okay, well, I think we've said enough about that. We want to get to Trump, the businessman. He can certainly get the nomination, and he may well get elected, but will he survive 4 years?
Donald Trump?
Yeah, do you think Donald Trump, as a businessman, can handle the foreign policy of the United States, or is he going to sink? Is he all a fraud, or does he have some real qualifications?
I think that Donald Trump's primary problem, and I don't mean in the primaries, I mean his problem as a human being, is that he is totally obsessed first and foremost and only with his own self-aggrandizement. I don't think that he is interested in much beyond what's good for Donald Trump. And so I think that makes him a very dangerous personality. He's obviously got a temper. He's obviously beholden to his own whims at any given moment.
New York Times, Washington Post theory.
And I think that makes him a very dangerous political leader because I don't think that he's a very thoughtful individual. I don't think he's very reflective. I think he's impulsive. I think he acts on whims. I don't think he gives due consideration. And I think in the end what he wants is to self-aggrandize more. He's a sociopathic egomaniac in a way. And that's not an effective leader. That's not an effective president. It's not a statesman. It's a reality television star. So I wish he'd take his reality television show out of my presidential politics. And
but you see, my third question is, as of the 27th of February, why did the pundits and the Republican Party and the TV people underestimate Trump's real ability? He got a BA in business from the Wharton School.
Well, yeah, I don't know why they tried to pretend that he was a dummy. He's not dumb. He's not stupid. He's a lot of things. He's not stupid. I don't know why they underestimated him. I never underestimated him.
I think they were hung up on their own ideology. They were intellectuals. They were not racist. So they assume that the Democrats and the liberals already won the race debate with Martin Luther King and Obama, and were over-optimistic about grassroots America. 74% of the voters only have a high school education.
Yeah.
And that's where Trump gets his votes.
But and he's tapping into a very populist grassroots thing. It's just conservative populism.
Right.
It's not the liberal populism that Obama was able to tap into.
Right. So I think we're going to have a long campaign to the two conventions in Cleveland and Philadelphia. Do you want to say anything more about Trump's negatives?
Well, I think I just kind of summed up my feelings on it.
Right. Well,
what's interesting is that his policy proposals are not like off-the-wall conservative. For instance, Ted Cruz has much more conservative policy proposals.
You think Ted Cruz really believes in Christianity?
I think that Ted Cruz is a snake oil salesman. I think that Ted Cruz is a evangelical healer, fraudster running around the country. He might as well be on a train setting up tents in small towns, getting people to donate their money so he can, heal their lame leg or whatever it might be. He's Jonas Nightingale without the heart. I think he's a fraud.
In other words, the question is, does Trump believe his own propaganda, and does Cruz believe his own propaganda?
I think that Trump probably believes his own propaganda. I could think of harsher words for it.
Well, he calls it political correctness.
I think that Cruz is slimy in a very Nixonian way. I think that he would say almost anything that he feels like would be an advantage to him.
You're saying there's a consistency to Trump. He's consistently for big business.
Yeah, I think that's true.
He's
I don't know.
He's consistent about the debt.
He consistently lies. I mean,
yeah.
You can count on that. He's consistently, emotional.
Right.
I don't know if he's. I don't think he's consistent on his policy because he can't be, because he'll say whatever he feels in the moment.
Right.
And if that contradicts what he said yesterday, he'll just deny that.
Okay. Well, looking at the South Carolina results on the Republican side, Trump got 46% of the vote. Rubio got 24% of the vote. Cruz got 21% of the vote. And Carson got 8%, and Kasich got 5%. They can't get together and unite against Trump.
No.
They all have to shoot one another first before they can get to Trump.
Right. And it's getting too late.
The Republican establishment is saying, hey, Rubio, you get out. And Rubio says, well, why not? Why doesn't Cruz get out first?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And it's too little too late, because at this point, we've already had 15 states vote. And the game's already kind of set. So if that's what they and I agree that that's what they needed to do if they wanted to have any shot at overthrowing Trump's nomination, but they would have had to do that a long time ago.
Right. Okay, now here is a comment from the Athens Messenger, written from the Los Angeles Times, a guy by the name of Doyle McManus. Donald Trump knows exactly what he's doing. Did you read that column?
I didn't, no.
Yeah, very interesting. He says that forget about all the rhetoric. The real Donald Trump is a negotiator and can take on the Pope and can take on China and can take on Mexico, and he doesn't want to vote for Trump, but he thinks that the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post and the New York Times have greatly underestimated the real Donald Trump, who's like Kissinger, going to be a wheeler and dealer. And that's why some of the voters understand this. and he touches a raw nerve. The voters want drugs and Mexicans stopped at the border. The voters want a strong tariff against China and sink the China industrial market and bring those jobs back. So Trump has some real appeal, and that's why so many Democrats have defected from the Democratic Party, and at least in this election are going to try Trump as the unknown capitalist. But taking on the Pope is a dangerous deal, and the Republicans are ignoring the reality of climate change. So anyway, in the primary, Trump took Virginia. That's his strong suit. And he took Texas. That's his strong suit. And he's on his way to nomination. And Trump is liberal on abortion. He gets women's votes. He's liberal on birth control. He used to support Democrats. He used to support Republicans. So he's clever enough to change parties when he sees them sinking for economic reasons. So Trump may do better than you and I expect in office. Now, what about this Ku Klux Klan thing? Is that a lot of baloney, or is that real?
Well, I'll try to be as fair to him as I can. I thought it was funny that he hears that the Pope says something bad about him and he'll attack the Pope right away. But then he hears that the Ku Klux Klan has endorsed him, and he's got to think about that for a day first.
But he knows that there are some votes out there.
Now, in all fairness to him, he did come out the next day and repudiate the support. But it took him a full day to do so, and I haven't seen that. I haven't seen him take a day to decide on anything until it came to white supremacists.
Well, Trump's argument is, I've repudiated this 3 times. Mm-hmm. Why do I have to keep repudiating it? I've said it 3 times.
Yeah, that was in his speech last night.
Yeah. So why do they repeat this? I do not support Donald Trump. David Duke, and I've never remembered the Ku Klux Klan.
Yeah.
And but he is going to be weak in the long run in hiring blacks. And you can be sure that 3% of the blacks are going to, 2 to 3% will ever vote for Trump. He's alienated.
Well, it's a dog whisper campaign. It's a dog whistle campaign.
Well, anyway, we should summarize what we've tried to do today. And we're summarizing the importance of the last Super Tuesday. Do you want to have any more comments about that, the significance of this primary?
About Super Tuesday?
Yeah.
I don't. I think it kind of confirmed a lot of things that I figured were going to happen, and it's set the both nominations on a trajectory that it's going to take a lot to knock them off of that trajectory at this point. Now, nobody's going to give up. The opponents on both sides, nobody's going to give anyone a pass, and they're going to continue to fight it out as long as possible. If you remember, in 2008, Hillary fought it out all the way until June.
Yeah. Well, if I were to do it, I would reform the primary system. I think that Iowa and New Hampshire have the best primary caucus participation of grassroots America. And the problem is that the other states, when they run 10 primaries and caucuses on the same day, is rushing.
They diminish their own value.
Yeah, their voters don't really understand the issues. Mm-hmm. So if I were to reform the system, I would have New Hampshire, Iowa, and Nevada, and Sanders and South Carolina run the first four statewide primaries or caucuses. Then I would divide the rest of the campaign, one state a week for 4 weeks.
Oh, I see.
Have a primary every week, and
Yeah.
that would give 24 states the right for an individual day
So they can
with
get
the-
more attention.
where Ohio voters can get on television and express their views.
I've heard similar sentiments.
And you would do it by population. In other words, the biggest states would be the first four, and then the next four would be right on down, and that would cover 24 states. Now, there are 24 states with very little population, like Wyoming and Utah. They would probably have to double up with Illinois or St. Louis or one of the big cities, and they'd only get a half a day in the sun. But that's the way I would do it. That would give the voters maximum participation, and we can start preaching again the importance of democracy that Washington, Jefferson, Woodrow Wilson, and Franklin Roosevelt understood, because democratic values have been undermined by big business and big corporations, and Citizens United is one of the first necessities to be repealed.
I absolutely agree. I think that we need a constitutional amendment for campaign finance reform, and that would go a long way to fixing our corrupted politics. And I'm always in favor of increasing democracy.
And I think our slogan, debate, is the option of democracy, is right in tune with Bernie Sanders. And if I live long enough, I'll send him a tape of this.
Thank you, Professor.